Hello to the chicos and the chicas. Today on the menu is going to be an absolutely tremendous endgame. You can already see the beginning of some absolutely amazing stuff on the chessboard. This wasn't a planned video, but hey, when Magnus Carlsen and Vishy Anand, or rather I should say Vishy Anand and Magnus Carlsen have a go at it, you know that you are in for a treat. And boy, these two have created one of the most remarkable endgame of the year, hands down, of the year, and I can't resist the temptation but to have a good look at it and probably reveal a couple of things that you might not have seen or might not have heard yet about this endgame and its intricacies. So I'm going to start right off of here, which is middle of the middle game, and in fact I'm going to blitz through the next 10 moves just so that we are going to be right at the beginning of the endgame story. So I'm going to trade off one pair of rooks and we will stop right about here where Anand pulls the rook back to d2, and let's start with a cursory evaluation and glance at the board. We have got a, I wouldn't call it a typical French endgame from the Winnova, but we can see the skeletons of the Winnova, in particular the doubles, C pawns, and the loner A pawn on the side. The kingside structure is rather unusual for a Winnova, but the long story short is that it's incredibly difficult to evaluate this endgame precisely on the basis of who has got good and bad pieces, because the bad French bishop is indeed pretty awful in terms of having 6 out of 7 black pawns blockaded on its color. But boy, does it have a ripper of a diagonal, and does it have a target to aim for. Likewise, the white bishop on b4 is also gemmed in amongst 4 pawns blocked on its color, but it's also dominating an important diagonal and has the potential to do some hurt. Anyway, let's proceed from here. Suffice to say that the engine at this point of the game tells you that it's a big fat 0-0-0-0 dead even. Magnus throws in g3, a super exciting move to kick off the proceedings in the endgame. It's a very sexy pawn sacrifice. The idea being, of course, that king takes is met by rook g8 when black penetrates on g2. For a human eye, this looks absolutely intimidating. For the engine, it's like, nah, mate, it's all good. We still have to draw. Quite an insane line, actually. Never thought about it even before I put the analysis together for the video. I didn't even look at that. I naturally looked at knight takes g3, after which the idea of the pawn sack was to play rook g8. And to be honest with you, I thought that g3 was a very clever draw offer by Magnus, because I thought at this point that the game would inevitably go towards a logical conclusion, which is rook g4, rook d4, rook h4, and now against king, rook h2, I need to play king g1, and then the rook goes back, the knight is on, I defend the knight, and you get my gist. This is gonna be a draw. And then I started analyzing this a little bit deeper, and then I realized a couple of absolutely insane motives. First and foremost, I figured that if I played rook d4 here, after rook g4, this position is almost a zugzwang. Yeah, you heard that right. Look at that. I can't move the knight because g2 hangs. I can't move the rook because f4 hangs. And I can't move the bishop because a5 hangs. And nothing can move. Now, it turns out that this is not quite true, because actually I can afford losing a5. So any bishop move would still hold the draw here for white, because knight a5 is in fact losing, or rather, excuse me, it's risking a loss after rook d6, when the imminent threat is to win a piece by bishop f4, b4. I don't want to go into the details of this. It's extremely complicated, but suffice to say that I wanted to show you that this was an almost amazing zugi. But of course, white can just pass with the rook to and fro and only play rook d4 when black's rook is on g4. But Anand decided to ignore this, and I have a suspicion, by the way, I didn't listen to the press conference and I didn't listen to any of that stuff, so I don't exactly know. But based on the choices that Anand has made throughout this endgame, I got the impression that he was pushing for a win, at least in his head. Like, he wanted to win it. But let's see how it went. So rook g8, knight d4, rook back, pin. So he can't take c6. And now comes another interesting sequence at the end of which the rooks will come off as well. And so we are now finding ourselves in this minor piece ending, where again, at a cursory glance, it seems like black is the only one who has some chances, because the h5 pawn is the only meaningful target we can find on the board, and white has not an awful lot to play for, which makes me a little bit curious about Anand's choices here, but let me not get ahead of myself. Bishop f3, king e3, bishop d1, king d2, another golden opportunity to call it a day, but thank goodness the players decided that there was more life in the position, and so they kept on playing moves. Now, after king e8, king d2 is perfectly fine, knight e7, and at this point, Anand takes on e7, which I'm perfectly fine with, very logical. King takes back, and here, I really can't explain this. He plays king c1. This is an extremely ugly move, and it really does give black a lot of chances of doing something with the position. And he had two very easy draws, of which I think the most notable one is knight e2, which may look paradoxical at first sight, because it hangs the h5 pawn, but the concept is crystal clear. I chuck the knight on d4. That cuts off the black king's entry to the queen side, so that's gone forever. Matter of fact, it also threatens to pick off the a6 pawn due to the check. And last but not least, it glues the king to the defense of the e6 pawn. Only move is bishop e8. And now if I just walk my king to the king side, the position is entirely sealed off, and we are walking away with a draw. Now, I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that Anand would have seen it, which makes me all the more confused about king c1, because that move does not look like a winning attempt. Very quickly, let me show you why this is a draw. So pawn push king here, and now if you push, then you lose the pawn. If you don't push, let's say pass, then I just park my king, and I'm just going to pass to and fro here till eternity. No progress is to be made here, and it's a draw. So to skip this, to give a miss to that, and go like, no, I don't want this because it's a boring draw, and then play king c1. Yeah, I just don't know what to do with this, but I will move on, because it's not really about me trying to figure out how Anand was thinking. King d7, of course, and of course the white king is not going to be allowed to penetrate there. As a matter of fact, by now we realize that the big issue is that king a3, king c5, and it is going to be black playing b4 and penetrating via d4. Now, what I found very interesting, speaking of the engine eval here, is that the engine tells you here that the position is floating between minus 250 to 3, which essentially in engine language is that black is completely killing it. And then I started playing out the engine's recommended line, and it's giving you zilch, absolute nothing. It just makes no sense. It's toing and froing with pieces without any progress made, and eventually the engine actually lands on the plan that was played by Carlsen in the game, which was b4. However, as soon as you play this, the engine's evaluation drops down at least by half. So now it's minus 1.5, and then as we play out the played moves, it drops even further. And in fact, after c3, king d3, it sets back to dead zero. Now, what is about to come here is just absolutely bonkers city. One of the most breathtaking endgames I have seen in a long time. Let's have a look. Anand plays b5. It's very necessary to create counterplay, because we are in a zugi. The knight can't move without giving up the pawn, and the king can't move without giving up this pawn. So it's absolutely imperative for white to find some sort of a play, and tada, we have got a pass pawn. But the big issue here is that black also now has an opportunity to create a passer of his own by b4 and then c3. a6, king d2, a7, and bishop d5. Now, this move, and I don't know if other YouTubers or chess media people covered it at all, but this move, in my opinion, should get 2 exclamation marks at the very least, despite the fact that the evaluation of the position here is dead draw. And after bishop d5, the evaluation of the position, dead draw. However, there is something particularly cunning about this move here, which I need to show you by demonstrating a draw against bishop c6. Now, one of the drawing lines here, actually no, I need to send the king to d3 for that. How will I do that? Yeah, so before we get to that, let me show you something else. The very basic draw here, and probably I should refrain from saying very basic, but the drawing mechanism that Anand missed here was to give a check on f1. This surprising retreat actually completely messes with black's scheme, who now needs to commit to a bad square for the king no matter which way to go. In order to understand this, let's have a very brief look at the game. Knight f5, and now comes b4, which wasn't played by the way, but this is just as good. b4, and now the pawn marches in with checks all the way, or at least the king is supporting the pawn's movement forward. So the point of knight f1 check is to force the king away from covering all three of these squares. For example, king e2, knight here, king here. And then knight takes f5 is now, in fact, winning for white. Because now b4 is powerless, because there is not even a threat. Because when you take on c3, I can drop back to c1, and that pawn is not promoting. So this is all over red rover. Quite insane, but actually knight f1 check here is an easy draw. Now, the draw I wanted to show you, or rather the idea behind bishop c6, the idea why I was going to tell you, was this. Takes, e6, b4, e7, bc3, king a2, c2, queen, that queen, not the other one, takes, and the position is a draw. Remember that I am showing you now the bishop c6 line, because after c1 queen, the pawn-queen combo create an extremely awkward setup where the white king is stalemated. And so now I just have the classic case of the rampant queen check, and I'm going to sack my queen. It has to be accepted, and whichever way black takes, it is a stalemate. So why was bishop d5 such a genius of a move instead of bishop c6? Well, I tell you why, because the difference between the two lines is that now after b4, e7, bc, king a2, if I do the same and I promote the queen here first, then c3 is a discovered check which allows black to release the stalemate and ensure that the pawn promotes with a check and black wins. Wow! Now that is nothing to sneeze at. Wow, wow, wowee. And so here, knight takes f5 is in fact a losing move, and once again, the drawing mechanism would have been check, and after king d3, you simply slide the knight back to g3, recreating the threat. Note there is a beautiful line here. If black decides to chase the knight, after knight g3, king f3, black even loses, because now knight f5, needless to say that b4 is now just completely worthless because the king is no longer on d2. So the only sensible move is to take f4. Note that if taking the knight and the pawn marches in, one or the other, doesn't matter. And after king f4, here is a beautiful conclusion too. Knight h6, king g, let's go king g5, and knight g4. Now that is an absolute dagger in the heart type of move. We can't take the knight because the pawn walks in, and if we take the pawn, then knight check. And it just, everything just falls into place for black. And after king g6, knight takes, now we have got a queen and GG, the game is over. So, back to the game. Anand misses knight f1 draw, plays knight takes f5. We go ef5, e6, b4. Now we see what black's main idea is. We have already seen this. I demonstrated that with the bishop c6 line. e7, bc3, king a2. And at this point, by the way, if you haven't seen the footage, I very highly recommend you to check it out. I saw it on ChessBase India Instagram, I think. When Anand played king a2, he sort of gave a look to Maggie. Maggie was looking down, and then he noticed what was up. He looked up at Anand, and then they both had a smile. It was such a cute moment of two chess geniuses acknowledging the cunning trickery that was going on here. So Anand is setting up for the stalemate again. Right? c2 is played. a8 queen is played. At this point, and I think it sort of adds a little bit to the drama that went down, because if you think we are done, not even close. Even if you have seen the game, I'm telling you, not even close. Here, black is -10. Maggie takes the queen. Anand promotes the queen. And Maggie plays bishop e4, 7 question marks. And -10 goes to dead even. He actually threw away the win here. To be fair to him, though, he has 14 seconds. And so, not that I ever wanted to criticize other players, but from here on out, I'm just showing you this because it is so immensely beautiful. So if my commentary has an edge, it's definitely not directed at the players, but more so just to show you the contrast and the beauty of the position and the moves that could have been played and the ones that were played. The insane move here is actually c3. And the problem here, by the way, with bishop e4 is that it sort of left, so to speak, the stalemate net on the board. And the stalemate is very much a motif now, and white can easily wiggle out of this situation. But if he had played c3, he would have won easily, because now the genuine threat is c1 queen. And white only has one check. So you give a check, I go here or e2, it actually doesn't, actually king e1 now, yeah? So that there is no check here. And when I give a check on the e file, it gets blocked, and there is no way of stopping this. You play queen a3, I go back to d2, you go queen d6, bishop d3, I shielded the king off, and when I promote to queen, there is no stalemate net to be found anymore. And black wins. But in the game, Magnus played bishop e4. And now it's a draw. Queen d8 check, correct move. Both players here are down to minimal time, as you can see on the bottom. Bishop d3. And here comes the absolute insane tragedy. Anand plays queen d4, which is, I wouldn't want to say the only losing move on the board, but one of the most obvious losing moves, so to speak. One very beautiful draw would have been queen b6, when c1 queen again recreates the stalemate situation, and queen d4 check forces black to accept perpetual or the stalemate. That is really, really, really nice. And the other idea, of course, is that if I promote to knight here, then it's nowhere near as good as the game. And after king a3, in fact, white might even play this for a win. White might even play this for a win because h6 is hanging. And then I can come back to sack my queen for the c-pawn, and this rolls in. Another motive, though, and I don't know if I saved it somewhere. I don't think I did. Is that if I really want to have a draw, I play king a1, you play c3. And that's a new stalemate motif. Unbelievable. Absolutely bonkers city. And now the pawn knight bishop trio creates a stalemate scenario. And after king c2, queen d2 check. Oh man. And that's a draw. It's a draw. No matter what you do, stalemate, stalemate, and if you walk, then white even wins with queen c1. Absolute crazy town. And so the real deal was queen d4, and now c1 knight under promotion wins only because poor Anand walked into king a1 knight b3 fork. That is the reason. And that was the reason why queen d4, when I said that that was almost the only losing move in the position, is more or less true. Oh man, well, it's not quite right, because even if I play, for example, queen f6, c3 I think does win. So the idea is that white had to defend somehow against c3, and the reason why queen b6 does it is because now after c3 we have perpetual check. So actually I have to back off a little bit. But queen d4 was an extremely unfortunate way. So you understand the logic now just as well as I do, that queen d4 did make a lot of sense because Anand wanted to go to f2, but he had to go via b6 so that he didn't stumble into this extremely awkward situation with the knight fork on d4. So the game ended with a beautiful knight promotion, queen d4, c1 knight, and after king a3, c3, knight e2, followed by up, cannot be stopped. And the game was over somewhere around here. Yeah, I know this was some PGN error or whatever. I think the game ended here. The last two moves in my PGN file says knight c1, but that wasn't played for sure. It was, yeah, I think the game ended here. Yeah, absolutely crazy city. Like, this endgame had so many insane subtleties. It's just, yeah, what a delight. An absolute feast for the chess lovers. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I actually went through this game on stream once, and then I decided to go through it again by myself to analyze all the intricacies. And I still feel like there is so much left in it. But overall, I thought that, yeah, I hope I did some justice to this game. Really, really fun endgame scenario with so many tactics and flashy escape ideas. Yeah, it was a true delight. I hope you guys liked it as much as I did. Thank you very much for tuning in for this video. Please don't forget to sub, to like, to comment, and to super thank me if you can. And I shall be back with the next video soon. Thanks again. Cheerio.